Well, where do we start today? Uh, how many of you are writers here? Quite a few, huh? Yeah. How many are actors? I hear it, yeah. Well, that's even crazier. Yeah. I'm a little of both. Maybe it's best in this case if some of you volunteer the question. This is a different sort of group when I go out on the big stage and take off with one thing. So why don't we have a show of hands and a few questions, then we can start, okay? You're all stunned and shy, okay? Yeah, yes?
Yeah, do you think there are many people out there who are passionate about art, beauty, writing? Sometimes I get the impression from the world that people are just kind of skimming the surface and not really experiencing it.
It's always been true. The number of people at any one period of time who are mad for acting, writing, painting, anything artistic is very small. You're going to be very lonely. Growing up in high school, I was in a high school in LA, 4,000 students. Well, there weren't very many crazy ones like me out of those 4,000. So among all those kids, I had to find one or two friends who would put up with me, and I got to know some of the teachers well enough so I could go talk to them. And but no, there are very few passionate people in the world, passionate about other things. There are some people who are mad for computers, building computers, inventing computers. Wozniak is a good example. He created that, and Mr. Jobs in their garage. The history of America is madmen creating things in garages. The Smithsonian came to me a few years ago, and they wanted to put together an exhibit about American scientific history, technological history. And I said, I'd like to create a huge exhibit full of garage doors, garage doors. And you open the doors one by one, and behind the garage doors are these madmen, starting in 1890, around there, where you have Ford inventing his automobile in the garage, and that flimsy little piece of equipment came out and changed the world. It changed it as far as people traveling and circulating. There were no roads in America. They were built during my time, in my late teens. Most of the major roads are only about 50 years old. You don't realize that. But he changed things as far as travel was concerned, sociability was concerned, and then the whole thing of a huge plant that ran efficiently for the first time with a number of people building automobiles at the same moment. That's the first garage. The second garage you open, and you see a couple of men working on bicycles, and all of a sudden they put wings on the bike and take off over Kitty Hawk. That all started in the garage. Then the third garage door you open, you look in, and there's a man with a mustache in there drawing a mouse, drawing a mouse. And that's how Mickey Mouse started in Glendale. The garage was still there. Someone bought it a couple of years ago, and they carried it off somewhere, God knows where. But he started Walt Disney in the garage. And you come on up through time, and you visit Altadena, and in a garage there you have a bunch of students working under von Karman, the scientist, and they created the Jet Propulsion Lab, which took us to the moon and out to the planets. These kids, I knew some of the people when I was a teenager who formed the Rocket Society. I was 18 or 19, and they weren't much older, 19, 20, 21. And they were messing around with rockets in meadows, in open fields, That's how space travel began. And Goddard, of course, was before that. and his rockets only went, out of his garage, they went about 30 feet in the air. 30 feet in the air, and now we're on the moon. It's incredible. All started in garages. And then you move on from von Karman students and jet propulsion and that, and you go up to Silicon Valley, and you open the garage door, and Wozniak is in there creating the first computer, huh? All out of nothing but imagination and passion. Passion to do something better than anyone else had ever done it. So when you mention the word passion, it applies to many different fields. And you go along with someone who has a different madness, huh? The Egyptians have a wonderful saying, at least I hope they have them. I'm making it up otherwise, that in the moment of death, when you visit the god of the dead in the underworld, there's only one question that God asks you before he lets you into heaven or hell. And the question he asks you is, did you have enthusiasm? Did you have enthusiasm? And if the answer is no, you're done. If the answer is yes, you get in. That's what I demand of each one of you. For God's sake, find something to be enthused about. There's got to be something. Huh? A lot of people are bored out of their heads. And I don't understand boredom. As soon as I feel anything like that coming on, I write another short story. Huh? There's always something to fall in love with. There's always some great idea that grabs you like a big bulldog, you know, and puts its teeth into you and won't let you go. It's wonderful to be in the throes of that sort of passion. So if you don't have that at this moment, you go to the library and you keep prowling. You can't find it on TV, you can't find it on the internet. Say, oh, well, all that. But you can find it in the library. What you're looking for is a mirror image of yourself. That's why we fall in love with certain books. You go to the library, you open various books and nothing happens, and finally you open one and you look at the pages and it's a mirror. This person, this man, this woman reflects your soul. And then you read everything that they had to write. And you go mad for this person, Emily Dickinson or John Steinbeck, I don't care who it is, huh? Or Shakespeare. And when I was 10 years old, I read all the Oz books. I memorized the damn things. I played all the parts. I was an amateur actor. I went the same way with Buck Rogers. I made my girl cousin come over to the house, and we do radio dramas based on the cartoon strips. I not only collected all these cartoons when I was a kid, comic strips from the daily papers, Buck Rogers, but then I collected Prince Valiant later when that appeared, and I wrote love letters to Mr. Foster and said he was the finest illustrator since Mr. Howard Pyle or many other of the early American illustrators. And in answer to my love letter, he sent me back two huge Prince Valiant original Sunday strips, huh? They're worth about $20,000 a piece today. I'll never sell them. But he responded to my love, you see. That's what I want you to do. When you love something, for God's sake, write to that person, if there is a person to write to, and say, you are wonderful, you are terrific, I can't live without you. And I've done this a number of times. I had a wonderful thing happen, oh God, 40 years ago. I think most of you have seen the Christmas Carol with Alistair Sim, huh? It's on every year, it's the best. There have been a lot of good versions by a lot of people, but Alistair Sim is triumphant, huh? And I saw it every year from 1949 to 1954, 55. And finally on Christmas afternoon, after I'd seen it, I was in tears, it was so beautiful. I said, I've got to write to this man and tell him how wonderful he is. It's a shame on Christmas Day not to recognize this talent and pay him more than money. So I sat down and I wrote a letter to Alistair Sim. I didn't know where he was, probably in London somewhere. I sent it to my agent in England. I said, find Mr. Sim, I don't know where he is, but give him this letter. Well, months went by. And I thought, oh hell, the letter's been lost, or he got it and he didn't care. You know, in April, months later, I got a letter from England, from Ellis Garcia, and it said, "Dear Mr. Bradbury, your letter reached me in the hospital and made me well." Well, there you are, huh? Isn't that a wonderful story? A wonderful story. So glad I wrote that letter. And every time I felt something like that, I've tried to follow up. There's a wonderful lady poet, Helen Bevington, lives back east here. And I read her stuff 45 years ago. She wrote a wonderful book called When Found, Make a Poem Of. When Found, Make a Poem Of. Be a jackdaw in the field, picking up bright objects. And when you turn them over, you turn them into a poem. A really good poet picks bright objects out of life. Inanimate objects or people or metaphors. Huh? And so I thought, 30 years later, after I read that first book, I'm still in love with it. What should I do? I said, I wonder if she's still alive. If she's still alive, she's got to be 60 or 70. But I've got to write her and tell her what a great book that is. So I wrote the letter, and I sent it to a publisher. And I said, I don't know if you're still in touch with her or not, but please, if possible, send this letter on to Helen Bevington to say I love her. Again, a couple of months went by. I thought, oh, Christ, it's going nowhere. And finally, a letter arrived from Helen Bevington saying, yes, I'm still alive. Huh? And thank you for it. And we've been friends ever since. We've never met. I correspond with her a couple of times a year. We've talked on the phone. She's in her 80s now. And I make her send me some of her most recent poems. And I send her some of mine, which they're not half as good. Huh? Her stuff is fantastic. So I'm saying here, there are all kinds of passion out there, huh? And you should react to the passion of others. You should be excited. Every day should be a goddamn wonderful adventure, huh? There's so much. There isn't time. You should all suffer from the Thomas Wolfe syndrome, you know. If you're familiar with his relationship with libraries, he went in there and went crazy because he realized he'd never have enough time in his life to read all the books, huh? And there was a time years ago when I was first married, and I'd go out shopping. My wife would say, "Give me your wallet." And I said, "Why?" She says, "We're going to go by a bookstore and we're going to have a book." I said, "Yeah, we have thousands of books now." And when I first got married, of course, we had no money, and I couldn't buy books. But when I began to get money, I couldn't stop myself. There was hardly a day I wasn't in a bookstore and buying a book, or in the library. You've got to be library people. I said that last night. I repeat it. This whole internet thing is a bunch of crap, you know. Stay away from it. You can't learn anything there. I've had 3 offers during the last month from various internet people who are coming and want me to give my material to the internet. And Stephen King has published a novel in the internet. So what? So what? It's not a book. It's not a book. I said to each one of these people, can your internet give me a book with a wonderful cover and great pages and good type that I can hold in my hand and press to my bosom and take to bed like a companion? And then I put on the shelf. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, if I don't sleep, I can get up and go down and reach up on the shelf and take down Fahrenheit 451 and open it and read a paragraph and say, God, did I do that? Did I do that? Thank God. And it's in book form with a beautiful cover. And it smells good. And it looks good. The internet can't do that. It can't do that. And the goddamn screen and all that crap is all so small anyway. It's an insult to your intelligence. It's a male macho pastime. You women stay away from it. Let the men be jerks. What a waste of time. Oh, you can be in touch with... I don't want to be in touch with people. I'm glad to be in touch with you. Huh? I get 300 letters a week. Do I need more? Hell no. Do you have email? Who gives a goddamn about email? I answer most of the letters every week. I have ways of doing it. I have cards for some, letters for others. Sometimes I send a book to someone. And there are other letters which are obviously can't be answered because they don't deserve to be. And someone writing and saying, what's the name of your latest book? Well, I'm not going to tell him that he call the latest bookstore, you know that. So people write and ask me to send them photographs. If they enclose a self-addressed envelope, I send them photographs. That's simple. But this email stuff and the spending time on the internet is wasteful. Go to the library and never come out. Huh? And it's because all the surprise. I love once or twice a year. I go to my favorite bookstore down in Long Beach, California. It's called Acres of Books, and it's a great big Egyptian tomb of books. It has tens of thousands of them, and it's a whole city block. And you wander back through aisles and aisles of books. They have a whole section on George Bernard Shaw, 200 or 300 books. They have 1,000 books on French history. No matter which way you travel, and you're going through and you blindly pick out something, and you say, God, I didn't know this existed. This play, or this book of essays, or that historian, huh? And that's the excitement, to discover some new face, some new town, some new life, someone who's been dead maybe for hundreds of years. Yeah? Go back to Alexander Pope. My God, he's as fresh as the day he was born. Huh? And reading Hamlet again, the greatest play ever written. Absolutely. So there's so many areas here. And now, what in the hell was the question? Yeah, you see, you're going to be afraid to ask me now because that question resulted in a half-hour lecture. So ask me another question. Yeah.
I was going to ask you back a little bit more on the passion and stuff like that. Seems like when we were, trying to get to the moon and stuff, there was more of a personal, inherent want to do things that had never been done before. But in the years since, we sort of left the moon, and everybody seems now to be concerned about making money. And it's like the personal drive that was there for that led so much advancement has been sort of replaced by a financial drive.
That's always been true. That's always been true. And there's always been people in the world that are money oriented. If you go into a restaurant and listen to people at the next table, they're talking money, they're talking stocks, and I don't understand that. It's fine if they have to live that way, but there's nothing they can hold in their hand. You see, I can hold my books in my hand. I can give you my books. They can't give you anything. They can't give you anything. Money should come as reward for work well done. And you wait for it. My income I sold papers on a street corner for 3 years, from the time I was 19 till I was 22. My income was $9 a week. And most of that money went for books. I went to the Goodwill. I could buy books for 25 cents, for 10 cents. I could get Shakespeare for 10 cents. I think the Goodwill still does that. They still have book places in all the major cities. You go, if you can't afford books, and some of you can't, go to the Goodwill. I have about 10% of the books in my house right now are things I bought 50 years ago when I had no money. So you wait. I told you last night, my wife took a vow of poverty to marry me. And we lived in Venice on a $30 a month apartment. Her income was $40 a week. Mine was $40 a week. When it came in, I wrote a new short story every week and sent it out. It didn't sell automatically. And when it did sell, I got $30, $40, $15 from Weird Tales, Super Science, Dying Science Fiction. It wasn't until I was 24 years old I began to sell to bigger quality markets that paid me $200 or $300. But that was a long time coming. And I was way up in my 30s before I began to have an income that was $100 a week. And then when John Huston offered me Moby Dick, all of a sudden I was making $600 a week for 22 weeks. And when Moby Dick was done, I went back to making $100 a week because I decided I didn't want to be a screenwriter full time. Why? Because no one remembers any screenwriter. You cannot tell me the name of the screenwriter of anything that won the Academy Awards this week. Nobody knows those names. You can't tell me who wrote the screenplay of Gone with the Wind. Name your other favorite film, Rebecca, Some Like It Hot. You might know Some Like It Hot because the director of the film was also the writer. But name all your favorite films in the last 20 years. You can't tell me one of the rays of those. So I didn't want to become unknown. I wanted people to know that this book they held in their hand was written by Ray Bradbury, for someone to identify with. So instead of writing screenplays, I wrote more books, which means I accepted the fact I would make less money for many, many years. And my income, I couldn't afford to buy an automobile until I was 38. And I bought one for my wife because suddenly we had 4 children. And we needed transportation, and we were getting a little crowded to be on the bus. So, if you're patient, you see, the thing about being poor is you don't know it if you don't talk about it. I grew up in a poor family. My family, my father and mother, we were on relief. We were getting money from the government, and money, food from the government when I graduated from high school. Now that's being often poor. My dad was out of work most of the time during the 30s. Most of the people in the United States were out of work. There's 130 million people here, and out of that 130 million people, the best percentage is out of work. We don't know what poverty is today. We don't know what poorness is. I didn't know I was poor because we never talked about it. You know, I discovered that when we moved to California, my father, mother, my brother, and myself in 1934, we had $50 to last us for a month to come out and try to find work and stay in California with some relatives. My dad and mother never told me. And we were there for a month. My dad walked everywhere because we didn't have money to buy gas for the automobile. And he'd come home at night and couldn't find work. The only time I ever saw my father cry was during that time. He came home one afternoon, he walked for miles, and tears dripping off the end of his nose. He was defeated. And luckily, the last day he got a job for $15 a week, and we stayed down in California, which changed my life because I love movies. I love movie stars. I had dreams of going over the wall one day and writing a film, because I was crazy for films. Well, that's the way it finally worked out. But much later, I resisted doing anything in the studios until John Huston came along. And I was old enough then to handle it. And then after that, I did the screenplay maybe once every 4 years because I didn't want to get trapped. I know a lot of Hollywood screenwriters who make 10 times my income right now today. They get $500,000 for a screenplay or $1 million, but they're not happy. They're not happy. They don't travel. They're afraid to leave Hollywood because they know they can be replaced. See, but I can't be replaced, can I? You can't replace me. I'm insolid. And it's not a matter of money. See, all those books were written almost for free. A lot of my books that are published today are full of stories that never sold. My 2 latest books are short stories. There's at least 10 stories in each of those books I couldn't sell anywhere in the market today. You'd think that Ray Bradbury sending a short story out, that people at various magazines say, hey, boy, here, look at this. No, it doesn't work that way. So I was 37, 38 before we could buy a car. And looking back at my family, how poor we were, I sold newspapers on the street corner. My brother went in the CCC camp, Civilian Conservation Corps, which was established at that time to take young men off the street, give them a place to live and work. An army of young men who got $30 a month, maybe it was 20, which they sent home to their parents because the parents needed it. That's how poor we were. But again, we didn't recognize it. And when I married my wife, we didn't talk about our lack of money. We didn't ask to have a car. We didn't want to have fancy clothes. We didn't need super decoration in our little apartment. And that went on that way, and finally I had the break of publishing the Martian Chronicles and Illustrated Man. It got started. But I waited until I was in my 60s before I did my own TV show, because I was afraid of these people. I was afraid of the lack of taste in Hollywood, the network people. I saw what Rod Serling went through trying to get money to put on things in his productions. I knew Alfred Hitchcock. I worked for the Alfred Hitchcock show. I did 9 scripts for that. It's one of the best relationships I ever had. But I saw that when Hitchcock wanted extra money, he couldn't get it to reshoot sequences in some of his films. Well, if they treated Hitchcock that way, how do you think they were going to treat me? So I was running scared, and I was in my late 60s before I finally accepted an offer from 2 producers to do a show with me and do it right. And I would write all of them, and I'd have complete control. And I would edit, and I would criticize, and I would help cast. It had to be in my hands, because otherwise, I had an experience. 20 years ago, I was offered a chance to have my own TV series. And it was all set up, and I went over to the studio, and the contract was there, and a pen and ink, and the 9 vice presidents of Universal Studios, and my agent, and they're all eager, and they welcome me, and they're all standing there in the line smiling, and I'm going to start my own TV series, and it's going to be great. And I looked at all their faces, and all their teeth. And I looked at the teeth, and I said, just a moment. I said, I'll be right back. I left the room, I went downstairs, I got in my taxi cab, I went back to my office in Beverly Hills, and I called the Universal, and my agent picked up the phone. He says, where the hell are you? I said, I'm back in my office. He says, what are you doing there? You're supposed to be signing the contract. I said, I'm not going to do the show. I looked at your faces, I knew the instant the ink was dry on the contract, you could hear it drying, you know. As soon as that was over, they'd say, Ray, would you mind changing this? Would you mind changing that? It can't be, it can't be. You can't take that sort of thing. In your private life, if you find a friend as your writer who can criticize you substantially and honestly and creatively, fine. But be careful. Don't get anyone that's going to kill you and criticize you in the wrong way. So what's true on a personal level is true out of that big world of TV or screenplays. I've been working for Mel Gibson for 10 years on Fahrenheit 451. There are 10 screenplays. Pardon me, I've been working 3 years. That's long enough. I did a screenplay. They never reacted to it. There are 9 more screenplays by other writers now. I've never seen one of them. They've never sent one to me. Mel Gibson's called once in 3 years. They paid me a lot of money. A lot of money. But so what? I'm not happy. I finally got a copy of the script from a bookstore in Atlanta. It had been stolen from the studio. And they sent it to me as a gift, saying, we got this from the studio. Have you seen it? No, I hadn't seen it. I called Mel Gibson's office. I said, I got a copy of your screenplay. They said, what? Where'd you get it? I said, from a bookstore in Atlanta. I said, why don't you send me other screenplays now? I'd like to see what you're up to. They never sent them. And now I know why. I opened the screenplay to page 45, just to test the water, see what's going on. And you ladies will have to forgive me. What I'm quoting from a screenplay, it's nothing I would ever put in a screenplay. The Montag is at home with Mildred. He's called in sick. The fire chief comes to visit. He comes in the door, and Mildred says to him, "Would you like some coffee?" And the fire chief says, "Do bears shit in the woods?" I closed the screen. I never read the rest. This is Mel Gibson's production. He's a wonderful director. He's a fine actor. His Hamlet is 10 times better than Kenneth Branagh's Hamlet. Huh? He's a quality man. But what's going on? Huh? Fahrenheit 451, you can shoot it off the page. It's a screenplay. I'm a screenwriter. Sam Peckinpah had a meeting with me 20 years ago. He wanted to do something with it this way comes. And I said, "How are you going to do it?" And he said, "Tear the pages out of your book and shove them in the camera." I said, "That's right, I'm a screenwriter. Every one of my stories can be lifted right off the page because I grew up in film. My mother took me to the movies when I was 2 years old, 1922. I can recollect all the major sequences of The Hunchback of Notre Dame I saw when I was 3. And friends didn't believe me, and I went to see a screening with them when I was 17 years old. And before we went in, I said, "There's this scene and this scene and this scene." We went in, and there they were, recollected from when I was 3. So I'm a child of cinema. And all my short stories that went on to my Ray Bradbury Theater TV program, 64 of them that I wrote, I typed them right out of the book. There's no difference between the short stories and the television stories. And that made it very easy for me because a lot of people don't know how to write for TV, but it's in my stories. Well, I don't know what the question was, but yes.
In that vein, of all the adaptations outside of you that have happened, I don't know, the 60s film of Fahrenheit 451, some of the EC comic book adaptations of your stories and things like that, which of those rings the most true to you?
The EC comics?
Yes.
They were all good. I always wanted to have my own comic books. Because I've got collections of comics put away. I have all of Tarzan, all of Buck Rogers, all of Prince Valiant, Mickey Mouse, Popeye, a lot of cartoons you never even heard of. I still have them, all plugged in up at home. The EC Comics people stole a lot of my stories, and I caught them in it. And this is back 50 years ago. And I said, "What should I do?" Well, I said to myself, "What would Christ do in a situation?" Well, Christ would turn the other cheek, right? So I wrote a Jesus Christ letter to EC Comics and congratulated them on the quality of the story and the illustrations and everything. I said, "Oh, incidentally, you're so busy, you forgot to send me an adaptation check." The next week, a check arrived. They knew that I was letting them off the hook, and otherwise they might get sued. So then I wrote to them immediately and said, "Hey, there are a lot of people out there in this world that are stealing my stuff." I pretended it wasn't them. I said, "Why don't you adapt my stories and put my name on them and protect my copyright?" So I formed an affiliation with EC Comics, and they adapted 35 of my stories, and we were all happy. And they did some beautiful work, and it was reprinted in various editions. And then starting about 6 years ago, I have my own comic books, Ray Bradbury Comics, and then they did separate editions of things called The Martian Chronicles, The Illustrated Man, but by artists all over the world. Just beautiful work, beautiful work. So, oh yes, well, thank you. No, that's not necessary, thank you. No, and it's wonderful to have that sort of thing. When I was show you the way I want you to behave. When I was 12 years old, Tarzan was appearing in the Sunday papers. It was illustrated by Harold Foster. Beautiful, it's the best Tarzan illustrations ever. The people who came later were good, Hogarth and what have you, but these were sublime. And I collected them when I was 12, and they had whole sections on dinosaurs and ancient Egypt, two of my great loves. And I just relished them. I collected them every Sunday, and I licked the pages, and I saved them and looked at them a million times. 5 years ago, they reprinted all these Tarzan strips by Harold Foster in book form. And they asked me to do an introduction to the second book. It arrived in the mail 2 years ago. I opened it. There was my introduction. And on the next page were all the dinosaurs. And then the next page after that, all the Egyptian episodes. I wept. I cried. Can you imagine? This 12-year-old boy gets his dream renewed in his 70s. In his 70s. So that's what I want for you. I want things like this to occur to you young, and then again when you're older, and again when you're even older. This thing of being elated and being part of the history of yourself. So there's a whole thing with Harold Foster. And I'd like to do more. I want to do more comic strips. Do you read the papers every day? You know, The Wizard of Id and The Far Side when it was still running. There's so many beautiful things that are better than most of the novels being published today. Certainly better than most of the humor you get on TV. Yeah, I met Johnny Hart years ago, and he's still doing The Wizard of Id. I don't know how he does. It's incredible. And so I've collected these things, and I've wanted to do cartoons for film. I did a film called Icarus Montgolfier Ride 40 years ago about the history of flight, starting with Icarus and Daedalus and coming up through the Montgolfier brothers in Paris 200 years ago, the first flight of balloons, and then the Wright brothers. And my story is the story of an astronaut going out to get on board a ship, and someone frivolously says to him, because you can't recognize him in the astronaut suit, "And your name, sir, what is it?" And he turns and he says, "Icarus Montgolfier Wright." The heritage of flight, starting 3,000 years ago, coming up through time, and the rocket ship takes off, and on the side are the mythological symbols, the metaphors of this history. And it was a 17-minute cartoon film that got an Academy nomination 30 years ago. And I did a film called A Little Nemo's Slumberland for the Japanese. It's not good enough. They didn't read my script, much less follow it. And I did a really good cartoon film 6 years ago, The Halloween Tree. It's on every Halloween, and it follows my book. They actually read my script and used it. And I do the narration. I speak the narration. So you see, I'm all over the place. I've done an opera on Fahrenheit 451. It's appeared in Chicago and New York. I'm working on one with Jerry Goldsmith. I've done musicals with Dandelion Wine and Something Wicked This Way Comes. And I can't stay away from the field. I did Wonderful Ice Cream Soup as a musical with Jose Feliciano. I love working with composers. I collect film music, starting back with Gone with the Wind and Max Steiner. So I'm all over the place. I'm that famous general who jumped on his horse and rode off in all directions. Well, how about another question now? Okay.
When you were first getting started, when you first began writing to be published, what were some of your ways of getting around discouragement, either from not being published or just from, this is going on for so long, I'm I really want to get this, I want people to read my work, but it's taking so long to get out.
Well, that's a very good question, because when I was about 24 years old, I wasn't doing all that well. I was selling a lot of stories, but they were all for 30 bucks a piece. And people still didn't know who the hell I was. And I had a friend who knew a psychiatrist. And, you know, psychiatry was all the rage back 40, 50 years ago. I don't think it's quite as popular anymore, at least I hope not, anyway. And I saved up 20 bucks and I went to the psychiatrist. I didn't have a serious psychological problem, but I wanted to talk to someone about my career. So I sat there and the psychiatrist said, "What's your problem?" I said, "I want to be the greatest writer in the world." You talk about ego, huh? And he said, "Well, aren't you?" I said, "No, but no one seems to be recognizing me. I'm not doing all too well. Well, what do I do? What do I do?" And he said, "You've got to wait." And he said, "Go to the Encyclopedia Britannica and read the lives of the famous writers to see what they had to put up with poverty, with not being known, fame coming very late. Occasionally, someone like Charlie Dickens doing very well early, but that's not the story for everyone. So if you are honest in what you say, you want to be the greatest writer that ever lived, it's going to take a little time." So I went home with that advice, and I realized it was going to take some time. And before people went up to me, and the way I knew I turned a corner when the Martian Chronicles was published, and there were no reviews except from Christopher Isherwood. I was on my way to New York for the publication of the book, still unknown. And I had a luncheon date at the Art Institute in Chicago. I got off the train at 3 hours before the next train in New York. I went over to the Art Institute to have lunch with a friend, one person. When I got to the Art Institute, I saw a mob of people at the top, 20 or 30 people. I thought it was a bunch of tourists going to the museum. All of a sudden, that cluster of people came down the steps toward me, and each of these people was carrying a copy of the Martian Chronicles. They'd read it ahead of time, and they were my lovers. And I had finally been accepted into society, and I was on my way. I wasn't on my way very far. I didn't make any money, but I had a lot of love, a lot of love. And one of the greatest things that can happen to you, and I want it to happen to you too. I was standing on a street corner 10 years ago, waiting for the light to change, and a flitter pulled up with a young man behind the wheel, open top. He stood up behind the steering wheel, and he yelled over at me, "Mr. Bradbury?" And I said, "Yes." He says, "I love you." And I said, "I love you too." And he was gone. That's what I want for you. Someone to love you for what you do, for what you do, and do it well. Yeah, I'm ready to recognize quality wherever you see it. My friend Ray Harryhausen, I've known, he built his dinosaurs in his garage. I met him when he was 18 and I was 18. We became fast friends. And he built these dinosaurs and animated them. And he made little amateur films. And I went to the studio with him. He was trying to get work, And we finally got our first film together. It was The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. But it's not a good film at all. But it was the beginning. It was the beginning. And then he moved on to Mighty Joe Young and Clash of the Titans, Jason the Argonauts. Now he's famous everywhere in the world. Everywhere in the world. There are Ray Harryhausen festivals. And I'm his best friend. It's not all... When the Academy announced it was going to give him an Oscar for his career, his 40, 50-year career of building and making and animating dinosaurs, I called the Academy and I said, "There's only one person can give Ray Harryhausen his Oscar. That's me. And if you don't let me do it, I'm coming over and I'm going to tear the place apart. They said, okay, okay. So the night of the Oscars, you maybe saw it 7 or 8 years ago. You saw me on TV giving Ray his Oscar for his dedication and his love, his passion to what he did, huh? And I cried the whole evening. You'd think I was getting the award, huh? That's how close our friendship has been and still is. Huh? So dinosaurs, Tarzan, comic strips, poetry. I wrote poems for all these years, lousy poetry. Only in my 40s did it begin to get good. I wanted to write decent plays. They were terrible when I belonged to a little theater group when I was 19. And I took 20 years off. I realized I had to see every play that ever existed or read it. I got a job as an usher in the theater, and so I could see the plays free when I was 20, 21, 22. Went to the ballet 400 times. That's a lot of seeing, isn't it? And all the plays of American history, plus reading them, plus all the French plays, all the English plays, all the Italian plays by Pirandello. And when I was 40, I began to write one-act plays. And I didn't know if they were any good or not. A friend of mine said, oh, what do you think of your own plays? I said, I don't know. You can't read a play. That's not the way. You got to see it on its feet and see if the damn thing works. He says, come to the house next Thursday night. I'll have some actors there, and we'll read your plays. We'll stand them up and walk them around and see if they're any good. They were Irish plays based on my experiences in Ireland and my being under the influence of Sean O'Casey, certainly one of the great writers. So I went to his house the next Thursday night, and waiting for me there was James Whitmore, certainly one of the greatest American actors ever, and Strother Martin, whose work you've seen in various films over the years. And they read my plays, and we fell on the floor. They were good. Huh? They were funny. They were comedies, like in the tradition of Sean O'Casey. So I got into an amateur group. See, the thing about theater is this. You don't have to wait for Broadway and all these crappy things that go on back there. Make your own theater, huh? In your living room, in your garage, rent a storefront. Go to the nearest little theater and say, is your theater empty on Monday night? Can I have it that night? Do you want $10 or can I have it free? Which is what I did. I put on plays free. I did a wonderful ice cream soup part of a little theater group 35 years ago. We were all starting out. Some of those people moved up into film. You saw Harold Gould in The Sting later, huh? But he started with me as an amateur actor. You work for free because you love it. Huh? Theater is a magnet. I just love theater. Huh? I love being around. I love arriving early at night when the theater is empty and the magic hasn't begun. Huh? It's a magic show because once you're out on the stage there, no one can help you. Huh? You're all alone. Your director's somewhere, your producer's somewhere. You got the audience there waiting for your magic trick, and you got to do it. And when you do, my God, what a triumph! So I joined all these theater groups, and we put on my plays to see what I could do. Then I rented a theater for $20 a night, and I saved up my money finally and spent $400 a week to rent a theater and put on 3 of my one-act plays. And because I wanted to see if I could do it, and I wanted to see if some critics would say, yeah, not bad, not bad. Or, you better go get a day job. So we put the plays on. I had Harold Gould starring in one role. He was fabulous. And he's had a great career since. And the reviews were all good. All good. We got 20 reviews, all brilliant. Huh? And so I proved myself. But I was in my middle 40s by then. And I'd been around theater, and I'd done my research. Research is a bad name. I'd done my loving. Huh? I'd done my loving. So, one by one, I picked off these things that I wanted to do. And I've done them. Huh? and they've turned out okay. Every once in a while I write a real clinker though. I did a show called Leviathan 99 and put it on in Hollywood. It was financed by a toy manufacturer's daughter, and he was one of the biggest toy manufacturers in the United States. And his daughter put money into my play, and it was a disaster. Badly cast, and it was too long. I had delusions of Shakespeare. And when it was over, this old man, this toy manufacturer, staggered up to me and said, "That was the worst play I've ever seen." You know what I did? I embraced it. I was an honest man. And everyone else was saying, "Oh, it's an interesting play." No, it wasn't interesting. It was lousy. So I've always admired that man. He stayed as his friend ever since, because he told the truth. Okay, another question. That can't be. Oh yeah, her.
Do you feel that your fame has helped your creativity along over the years?
I'm sorry.
Do you think that fame has helped your creativity?
No. Fame, if anything, you can ruin it, I suppose. You must never think. The only time I think of myself as Ray Bradbury is when I come to a place like this, and the people call me by name. I say, "Oh yeah, that's me." You mustn't think that. Fame is that's not what you're out for. You're out for love. That's a different thing. And I got so much love last night from the audience. You know, that's my reward. And I speak at libraries all the time. I help raise funds for 90 different libraries. And that's all done free. I mean, my reward is the love that comes out of the audience. So that's it. No fame. It's like money. It can buy you certain things, but that's it. You know, it can't buy you love. There's a song by the name, isn't there? There's one of the Beatles songs. Sure. Can't buy me love. And I got my first lesson in money when I was 25. I sold a short story at Collier's Magazine for $500. Well, that's 55 years ago. That was a lot of money. That would be the equivalent of $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 today. But on that same day, I had a breakup with my girlfriend. The check was worthless. The check was worthless. So God taught me a good lesson on that day. You can't count on money and you can't count on fame. All you can try to count on and give back is love. That's all. But and thank God I made up with my girlfriend a couple of days later, and the words began to appear on the check again. How about, yeah?
You touched on this a little bit last night, but what do you think we should do as a society, or I'm studying to be a teacher, so as teachers, to get kids excited about reading?
The politicians God, it's been a long 6 months, hasn't it? They've been making fools of themselves, both parties. They shouldn't have started the campaign last July. We're all tired of them. Yeah? I said last night, repeat truths often unless they become lies. You know, and what we've got to do is all of our money in education should go into kindergarten and first grade. And unless you correct those two areas, you're going to raise a generation of morons. You're letting kids get by you into the 3rd grade and the 8th grade, into high school. They can't read or write. Come on, that's no society. So you as a teacher, ask your fellow teachers, for Christ's sake, let's stop teaching reading and writing in the 8th grade when it's too late. And teach it in kindergarten when the kids are open like flowers, in the 1st grade. And every school should be dedicated to the proposition that by the 2nd grade, all the reading and writing teaching is over. You've done it for once and all. And then the rest of the other grades don't have to lift that burden. It shouldn't be your job to teach reading and writing, So look to it. What's in your local school? What are they doing with kindergarten? What are they doing in the first grade? That's what you can do. It's a definite thing. And we're not doing it. Neither party is talking. I saw something by Bush yesterday in the paper, which gave me a little hope. He talked about kindergarten in the first grade again. And real tests for the students and for the teachers. We all have to be tested. A lot of teachers don't want to be tested. But I'm tested all the time. You're grading me right now, aren't you? Huh? You're going to leave here today, and later at lunch or this evening, people will say, gee, you heard Ray Bradbury this morning. How do you grade him? What does he get? Does he get an A or a B plus, C or D? What? You can't help yourself. I'm either doing well or I'm not doing well. I got a new book out. You buy the book, you don't like it, you're grading me. Huh? I'm not going to get any more work if I'm not careful. I'm going to go on being a good writer and a good teacher. I'm a good teacher right now because I'm enthusing you to the future. That's the important thing. Huh? So teachers shouldn't be afraid of being graded as long as they're loving their work and putting it into their students. Okay, go get them, kid.
Thanks.
Yes, way over here.
You've done a lot of, worked in a lot of different mediums from theater to TV, but what makes short stories your preferred?
Dylan, I can't hear you.
What makes short stories your preferred medium for writing?
You can turn a weakness into a virtue. I'm a sprinter, and my attention span is very short. I think a lot of people have that problem. So I read short stories, and I write them. I don't read that much in the novel. With certain authors, I've done that. But I grew up on short stories, and I write them because it's a wonderful way of getting your passion out quickly. And in a single day, you get a story done, not finished completely, but at least the first draft. And then on the next day, you can do another draft, and the third day, another. And at the end of a week, you've got a short story to send out into the world. And working in short stories, your chance of hurting yourself is smaller. If you spend a year on a novel and it's no good, you're destroyed, aren't you? So you mustn't do that. You young people mustn't take that sort of chance. You're not old enough to try the novel. I was 30 years old before I did my first novel, Fahrenheit 451. But when you write 52 short stories in a year, I defy you to be bad every time. You'll almost do it. But then on story number 45, you'll suddenly become good. And maybe story number 49 will be excellent. So that it's a way of getting things done. So every week you have a sense of accomplishment, of saying, yes, I did this. You know, maybe it's not very good, but I did it, huh? But you can't say that with a novel. And a novel is endless. And you say, oh, Jesus, you know, when will it end? Well, you can't have that. But with a short story, you say, yes, it's done, and I got another one coming up. Yes, Tim?
I hate to do this, but we're going to have to cut it. We're going to get everything done afterwards. So I want to thank you very
What time
much.
is it here?
It's a little afternoon.
I'll be damned, yeah. I do talk a lot, don't I? But it's been wonderful being with you, and I wish you all